This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean. Today with me, we have Mr. Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall is the discoverer of Septemics, and today we're going to be diving in, continuing our journey into Septemics. Jim, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get right to it.
Thanks, Chris. Well, as Chris said, I am discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aids in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And today we're going to discuss some of the content of that book.
Very good. And all right.
Okay, so the scale of mental deletion. First, I need to clarify what I mean by mental, because there's a massive amount of confusion. People have the mind mixed up with the brain and all kinds of other things, which it isn't. The mind is an electromagnetic field matrix, which is created by a spiritual being and which interfaces with the neural system of the body. Now, if you have no body at all, in other words, if you're non-corporeal, you still could have a mind. There are angels, for example, have minds. They have that electromagnetic matrix, from which comes your ideas and your personality. And in humans, or even in other species also, that mind intermediates between the being and the organism, and specifically the neural system of the organism. So when we talk about mental deletion, we're talking about actually erasing parts of that matrix. Now, we all know the term the subconscious. Well, the subconscious consists of all the things in your mind that you're not aware of. In other words, once a part of your subconscious becomes conscious, it's not part of your subconscious because it's conscious. So you have deleted it from your subconscious. So what actually happens, and I had a whole career of doing this, is if you can get the person to access a part of his subconscious where he can actually see it, to the degree that he sees it, it will be deleted from his subconscious, and it will then become conscious. So it's part of his usable data in his mind now because he's conscious of it. And more importantly, it has no power over him. You know, we talk about subconscious motivations, and mental health professionals estimate that maybe 95% of the motivation of a person is subconscious. So it's very similar to a post-hypnotic suggestion, where you can implant an idea in somebody and implant that he will not remember it, and then he goes around and has this behavior, this motivation, which comes from his subconscious, which is where that suggestion is buried. This is what MK Ultra was about. They figured out how to implant certain ideas in the person's mind in such a way that he's not aware of it. And this, to people like the CIA, is extremely useful because they can implant the idea murder in somebody, and the trigger is the word strawberry. So they call the guy up, they say strawberry, the guy goes out and murders somebody. Now, of course, this would be done under some influence or control. And I mean, they don't necessarily want him to murder people at random, although sometimes they do. But it's more like, we want you to kill Joe Smith strawberry. And the guy does it. It's implanted in his subconscious. So when you see people acting irrationally, what you know is that it's motivated by something in the person's subconscious. And the whole point of this scale is that you can delete portions of that if you know how to do it, which is what I did as a human development engineer when I was working on this aspect of the person. Now, this is not the only aspect of a person, because a person has to deal with his mind, but he also has to deal with his body, and he also has to deal with his groups. These are three separate domains. So I had to deal with all three of those in handling the client. But when I was dealing with the mental part of it, what I was doing is getting the person to delete something. And I would always know when the deletion occurred because you would have a realization. So a guy comes in and why are you here? Well, I can't get along with my wife. Okay, common situation. So we take this up, we're discussing it, and at some point the guy says, I just realized my wife was just like my mother-in-law. No wonder I don't like her. And I know that he just deleted something in his subconscious. I don't know what it is. I don't need to know that. I do know we're done with that cycle. Great. Let's go on to something else because we had a deletion. So that's what I was doing with people. I did this by Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback. And all of this data that I'm going to give you now just appeared in front of me as I was doing this. It's just like, if you take up fishing, right? After a while, you're going to learn a lot about fishing. You're going to learn, well, you don't want to make noise. It disturbs the fishes. It scares them away. And if you want to catch grunion, you have to go over that way. And if you want to catch bass, you have to go that way. And what time of day. There's a lot to know about fishing that somebody like myself does not know because I'm not a fisherman. But if you do something for a long period of time, you will garner knowledge. And that's how I learned this data, just by dealing with it and seeing what was in front of my face and writing it down. So this is a linear scale, meaning there's an infinitude of gradations between each level. Pardon me, I misspoke. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's a linear scale, meaning there's no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7. It's a gradual scale, meaning there's no gradation between, there are an infinitude of gradations between the levels. And it's a general scale, meaning that at any point in time, a person is at a specific level. Now, that could change if a person is getting successful facilitation or meditation or therapy or something. It could change. It could even change pretty quickly. A person could be at a certain level, and at another point in the session, he'll go up or down a level. And I expect that to happen in the session. I say, okay, now he's deleting at this level, and then a few minutes later, it's obvious when you see this. And I'm going to tell you why it's obvious, because it has these manifestations. So the lowest level of mental deletion is by re-experiencing. Now, most people know about this. This is generally credited to having been discovered by Freud, who got the idea that if you talk about something, you can change somebody's personality, meaning you're getting into his subconscious. So you don't have to be a psychologist to do this. A guy goes into a bar, and he's a regular patron, and the bartender says, "Joe, you don't look so good today. What's the matter?" And he says, "Well, I had a big fight with my wife. She wants to get a divorce. She kicked me out." And so this guy is telling the bartender about this, right? This bartender is going to get a big tip, because there's going to be a certain amount of deletion that is probably going to occur as a result of this. And the reason that occurs is because there's a rapport between these two guys. So they know one another pretty well. The patron is comfortable telling the bartender about this. And as I point out in my book, there are probably bartenders and pastors and priests and a variety of other people who get a lot of deletion inadvertently. They're not intentionally doing this, but it happens. That's why we have friends. Like this is more with women than with men, because men are, more stiff upper lip type. Men are more non-disclosive. But women, they get together and talking, oh yeah, really, tell me about that. So there's a lot of this that goes on between women, where the girlfriend, where there's a certain that's done by re-experiencing it. So when the bartender says, "Really, you had trouble with your wife? What happened?" And as you tell him, you're re-experiencing it in your mind. You're saying you're remembering that she yelled at you and she said bad words and she threatened you. And as you are telling this guy, as you re-experience it, some of it deletes. Now, notice this is by re-experiencing an incident repeatedly if necessary. So the reason I stated it that way is, let's say a guy was in an automobile accident, right? And he goes to a therapist. The therapist says, "Tell me about your automobile accident." So he does. There's some deletion. The next time he goes back, the therapist might say, "Well, how do you feel now about your automobile accident?" And the guy tells him more. See, he's kind of repeating this. He's telling him about this incident again, but he's kind of unburdened it a little bit, you see? So there was like a partial deletion. It wasn't completely deleted. When you delete something from a person's subconscious, he is done with it. Done. He's not interested in it anymore. Trust me on this. So let's say you have a guy, and he had a bad relationship. He has a broken heart. He took up drinking, So he goes into some kind of facilitation, and the facilitators tell me about it, and they use whatever technique they have. And at some point, this guy just doesn't care anymore. He's done with this. He doesn't have any bad emotion connected with it. He doesn't think about it anymore, And so he'll bump into somebody 5 years later and say, "Oh, whatever happened to Gertrude? Gertrude, oh yeah, Gertrude. I haven't thought about her in years. Yeah, we broke up long ago." See, he doesn't care about Gertrude anymore. He deleted that thing. It's not in his subconscious anymore. So you have a partial deletion or you have a complete deletion. And that's sort of a nebulous thing because the mind itself is a nebulous thing because it's a network. It's a matrix. And when you have a matrix, you have data which has other data adjacent to it in multiple directions. So that's what we mean when we talk about free association. I say a word and you say a word, good, bad, okay, red, crimson, you're associating. But red has a lot more association than just crimson. So you could think red, yeah, fire engines, blood, roses. See, so that's sort of how the mind is put together. It's a matrix. So these data fit like a Chinese puzzle. But let's go to the next level. Recounting. Now, recounting is different from re-experiencing. When you're re-experiencing, you are reliving it. So there's usually some unpleasantness associated with this because you're sort of reliving your wife throwing you out, see, or reliving your automobile accident. And of course, that's going to be unpleasant. Now, recounting is a little different. Recounting is a little more remote. And notice this is by recounting several similar or related instances separately. So the way this works is Well, did your wife insult you? Yes, tell me about that. Well, she said this. Okay. Well, there are other times she insulted you. Yes, she said this and that. Were there any more times? See, and you're sort of getting all the times that the wife insulted the guy. And at some point, he might say, that's pretty much it. I mean, I can't think of any more of these. So it's you're recounting something, not entirely experiencing it, and it's usually nearly always more than one. Okay, and most people who are involved in some kind of therapy understand this. So guy comes in, he's upset. Why are you upset? Well, I'm upset because I'm being audited by the IRS. Oh, tell me about that. So then, the guy still looks glum. So you say, well, was there an earlier time that you had an experience similar to this? Oh, yes, I was audited by them 5 years ago and it was terrible. See, that's a similar incident. So he's relating it separately from this one, but it's connected in his mind. So you're pulling strings from this matrix this way. And at some point, the guy will look bright and happy, and the therapist will say, well, any more you want to say about this? No, I said it all. See, he's fine now. He's not upset now. So that was level 6 counting. Now, I should mention, everybody starts at level 7. Nobody starts at any other level. So you might go through 7 pretty quickly, move up to 6. The further up you go on this scale, which is true for most scales, the fewer people ever get to that level. So there are fewer people at 6 than at 7. Now, the next thing is automaticity. What that means is an avalanche of several similar or related instances. So the way this works is it's sort of a foreshortening of level 6, where you say to the guy, so was there an earlier time your wife insulted you? And the guy says, yeah, there was this time and this time. Oh, yeah, I can remember 50 times. She's been doing this for years. And it's like Fibber McGee's closet. You know what Fibber McGee's closet is? There used to be a radio show, which later became a TV show, called Fibber McGee and Molly was the name of the show. And part of the running gag in this show was that Fibber would go to the hall closet, and when he would open the door, and you would hear this tremendous crash of things falling on him. So, and then later he would say, well, I'll go to the closet and see if it's in the, no, don't open. And he opens it and everything falls out on him. So this was like a running gag. And it didn't only happen in that show, but I think that's where it originated. That's what this is like. You open the door and everything falls on you. So this is like a hall closet that hasn't been cleaned out in 20 years. People keep stuffing things in their hats and baseball gloves, mucklucks, and ear muffs and everything else. And, you open the door and it all falls out on you. That's what this is like in automaticity. This is actually a very good thing, because this is like what you did at level 6, but it happens in seconds instead of minutes or hours. So it goes all the stuff, and that's it. It all deletes right then. So see, this is much more efficient. But this requires a higher cognitive ability, which is why this is a scale. You see, you're going to higher levels of cognition as you move up this. So the next one is observation. This is deletion by observation. You look at it and it goes poof. So the therapist says to the guy, well, did you have a previous girlfriend who treated you like this? And the guy thinks about it and then he says, yeah, I remember, that was Mary Lou. And he laughs about it. He's done with that now. Done. Doesn't care about Mary Lou anymore. All he had to do was look at it. See, he wasn't thinking about Mary Lou until he got the right question. Was there an earlier girlfriend who treated you that way? Oh, yeah, Mary Lou. And it all goes away. So that's deleting by observation. You see, that's very efficient. He just looks at it and it goes poof, done. Next subject. The next one up is enumeration. Now, enumeration, most people don't ever get to enumeration, even if they're in any type of therapy. So this is not going to be real to people, but I have seen this many times. And basically the way this works is a person finds some kind of a phenomenon in his mind that has more than one incident, which, by the way, is extremely common. And you just say, well, how many of them were there? And he tells you, and it goes poof. So, for example, let's say were there earlier incidents where you had a fight with your wife? Oh, yeah. Well, how many? How many fights did you have with your wife? The guy looks at it. He says 46. Poof. Done. It deletes. So you see, that is a high level of cognition. You have to really be able to penetrate into the subconscious to look at that and see that there are 46 incidents and they all delete simultaneously. Above that is deleting by location. Now, this is deleting by finding the thing. The interesting thing about this is the person who deletes by location does not even find out what it was because it deletes when he locates it. So you say, well, was there some bad experience you had with dogs when you were a kid? And the guy thinks about it for a second, and before he can even really describe it or see it, it deletes. He says, yeah, and he laughs about it, and that's it. He's not afraid of dogs anymore. See, that is a very efficient, high level. It deletes when you've located. You don't even have to observe it. Oh, yeah, that's right, poof. He's done. So you see, as a facilitator, when you're using this, you have to be cognizant of these so that when it occurs, you don't keep going on something that is now deleted, which is a waste of time. And you're going in the wrong direction. See, once this thing deletes, the guy doesn't care about it anymore. So he finds his, oh yeah, right, poof. He doesn't want to talk about that anymore. Let's talk about why my boss hates me. You see, it's another subject. And the highest one is by will. You delete something by will. And what does will mean? You decide about it. You just make a decision and it goes away. And I'll give you an example of this. I used to know a guy who was a heavy smoker from when he was a teenager. And, after a while, the data started coming out about how it causes lung cancer and heart disease and all these emphysema and all these other things. And so he just, being a health conscious person, he just says, I'm not doing this anymore. And he stopped. He just stopped. One day he said, that's it, I'm done with this. He just decided he wasn't a smoker. So whatever was going on in his subconscious that was getting him to smoke, he just looked at it and went poof. So it was by will, by sheer will. In fact, I had another friend of mine who had a similar thing where he was a smoker. And one day he showed up and he looked really happy. And he said, I stopped smoking. Really? That's great. How'd you do it? He said, I just decided I was a non-smoker. Now you might say, well, that doesn't really make any sense. But it worked for this guy. He just decided he was a non-smoker. See, that is an act of will. And he was done. Now, there are millions and probably billions of people who have struggled with this for decades, tried patches, tried nicotine gum, tried, all kinds of different ways, couldn't do it. I have friends, I'm sure you do too, tried to get off smoking, couldn't do it because it's a physical addiction. You get addicted to nicotine. So there are some people who have that ability, see, to just make an act of will. I'm done with this. So this is a very powerful thing. This is like a mysterious thing. This gets into something that doctors talk about, which is the will to live. So you have one guy, he gets shot with one bullet, he dies. You have another guy, he gets shot by 5 bullets and he lives. How did that happen? There's a famous racketeer whose name eludes me at the moment, who was actually assassinated by a policeman. They paid this policeman to kill this hood. So the policeman gets this guy in a room, empties his revolver into the guy, right? Walks out and figures this guy's dead. He lived. They got him to the hospital. They took the bullets out. Somehow he lived. So that guy obviously had a will to live. You see, doctors talk about this all the time. So you have 2 people with tuberculosis. This guy dies in 2 weeks and this guy recovers. How does that work? Well, the guy who recovered had a will to live. This is what they're talking about. He decided about it. And having worked with a lot of people, I've seen this. You have a guy who will just say, I'm not going to let this woman ruin my life. End of subject. He's done. You see, all this cognitive dissonance and everything, he just said, poof, it's gone. He doesn't think about it anymore, he doesn't care. He just decided. Now, this is a very, very high level of functioning. Most people never get there. So that's how this works. It's not about the brain, although the brain is a complicated thing and is an organism and obviously affects thought and behavior because the being sort of has a mind that connects to the brain. You see, when the person dies, the mind disconnects from the nervous system, from the body. So the being goes off. He still has his mind, although he has no body. The body is cremated. That is what the Hindus mean by your karma. This is a major theme in Hindu society, that you have a karma that you come into your life with. It's your mind. It's in your mind. So this electromagnetic field that the being creates, it doesn't go away just because the body died. If he goes into another lifetime, he brings it with him. And this is why I'll tell you, having worked with hundreds of people, it's not that hard to get people to run things from past lives. Not that hard. It's pretty easy. You just have to know how to run the session, make it easy for the person to say whatever's on his mind, asking the right question. So, was there an earlier time that you had something like this happen? The guy says, yeah. And then in 1921, I was living in Chicago, and he tells you all about it. And then it deletes. Because that was the earlier thing that was stuck in his subconscious that was acting upon him now, 80 or 90 or 100 years later. So that is actually not that hard to do. People make a big deal about it because they don't know how to do it. Once you know how to do it, it's not a big deal. Now, some people get to it easier than others, but again, that's just the mental capacity of the person. And that has nothing to do with the brain. It's the mind, which is a separate thing. Any questions?
Fascinating. No questions. Very good. That was excellent to hear from you. Very good.
Okay, next. Okay, the scale of aberration. Well, this is related to the previous one. Aberration means literally a wandering from the Latin aberrare, to wander from. And this is how you go from being your regular self to a crazy person. It's done in 7 stages. So, like, let's say a guy has a big fight with his wife, he curses her out, he slaps her in the face, and the next day he shows up with roses and says, "I'm sorry, I wasn't myself." We all know what that means. He went into some other kooky state that's not his regular self. I'm sure you've seen this, like you talk to somebody, he's in a terrible state. You can see he's not his regular self. I'm sure you can see this in yourself too. Sometimes, like my health, like I had COVID when we went through that whole thing. It took me a year and a half to completely recover from it. Right? And I said, I feel like myself again. I'm back to my normal self. You see, that was, of course, it was a physical malady that had terrible mental ramifications, because if you're really sick for a long period of time, it affects you emotionally. You get bummed out by it. So it's not unusual for a person who's very sick for a long time to get depressed. He's not depressed for emotional reasons. He's depressed because he's been sick for 6 months. Because, there's a lot of interaction between the emotional and mental and the physical. You can never totally separate it. So anyway, this is how you go from being your regular self down to being a crazy person. So what are we measuring here? We're measuring rationality, the vertical dotted line. Now at the top would be perfectly rational. No one is perfectly rational, although you can get 99.9999 maybe percent. And at the bottom is irrational. Is anybody totally irrational? Probably not. I mean, I don't know how the person could live if he was totally irrational. I mean, if a person's in a coma, you could say he's irrational. There's no reason in his mind. We don't usually think of that as irrational, but that's an extreme state of irrational where he can't respond to a question, even though his heart is beating. So that's what we're measuring here. So as you go down this scale, you become more and more irrational. Now, this is a linear scale, meaning there is no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7. It is a quantum scale. That is important to realize here. You are either at 1 or you're at 2. There's nothing in between. And you change, if you do change from one level to the next, it happens instantaneously. So you're at level 2, and a billionth of a second later, you're at level 3. Something goes click in your mind, and you're there. Now, it's a specific scale, meaning a person can be aberrated on different subjects. So let's say you talk to him about his wife, he might be a 3, secret. See, he's keeping a secret from his wife. He's secretive. He doesn't want her to know that he spent all his money on booze. He's fooling around with some woman, whatever. See, but if you talk to him about his job, he might be up at 1. Misconceptions. See, that's a higher level. See, he's not being secretive. He just has his little misconception. So this is context driven. So I don't know that there's anybody who is just in a unitary state on this. because you can see this all the time. You talk to a guy about one thing and he's daffy. You talk about something else, he's perfectly sane. So that's a different level on this scale because it's a different context. Now, this is important to understand because everyone enters this scale, if they do, at level 1. Now, you could have a person who, on a certain subject, has no aberration. He has no misconception, he has no misdeed, he has no secret, no suspicion. None of these things apply. So he is in a maximally rational state on that subject. If you talk to him about something else, if you bring up, let's say, his mother-in-law, oh boy, that's a different thing. See, now he's not so rational. So he might be down at 5, upset. He gets upset as soon as you bring him up. Don't talk to me about that. I actually had a client do that to me once. I was actually working with a client, and I brought up the stepfather in the session. I don't remember if I brought it up or she brought it up. Anyway, I asked about it, and she said, "No, I'm not going to talk about that. I don't want to hear about that guy." She was very upset, would not talk about it. Okay, that's fine. We don't have to talk about it. So you see, different context. So I don't know what we were on, but somehow we got on to the stepfather, and bingo, she was like a different person, completely uncooperative. Okay, fine, we put it aside and we went back, and the session continued, fine. So here's the way this works. The first thing is a person has a misconception. That's a misunderstanding. That's different from ignorance. Don't confuse the two. Now, sometimes ignorance can cause a misconception, but a misconception means you have the wrong idea. How about Hitler's misconception that the Jews were responsible for all of Germany's ills? That was clearly a misconception. It was a misunderstanding. He had the wrong idea. That was not accurate. So you see how that misconception could lead you down this scale? See, because once you have a misconception, it easily precipitates a misdeed. So let's say a guy has the misconception, you can't trust women. Lots of people have these types of misconceptions. Okay? That is a misconception. Some women can be trusted and some of them can't. And it's a matter of degree. Some women can be trusted somewhat. Some women can't be trusted at all. Depends on the woman. But if you have a blanket statement, you can't trust women, that's a misconception. So you see, it's going to be very easy for him to commit a misdeed against a woman, a transgression. So guy's going out with one girl, and you see him with another girl. So later you say, I thought you were going out with Betty Sue. Why are you going out here with Mary? I'm kind of surprised. He says, well, look, you can't trust women. You see? That's the way he thinks about it. Since he can't trust Betty Sue, it facilitates his going out with somebody else behind her back. See, it leads you right into it. Now, the next thing down is secret. When you commit a misdeed, what do? You keep it a secret. You see, if you did not think it was a misdeed, you wouldn't keep it a secret. So, for example, I don't eat sugar, period. So if I were to eat sugar, I would want to keep that a secret. You see, I would feel, oh, I did a terrible thing. That's how I think about it. I shouldn't have done that. That was bad. I'm not going to tell people. You see? So if you think it's a transgression, you keep it a secret. Now, you could go to another guy, most people, oh yeah, I ate some chocolate. He's not keeping that a secret. It's not a misdeed to him. You see? To me, it's a misdeed. To this other guy, it's not. He eats sugar all the time. So the misdeed precipitates the secret. And the secret is restraint. You're restraining yourself from an area. You're not letting it all hang out. Okay? That's what a secret is. It's a restraint. So you see, you put yourself in this little straitjacket where you're not going to disclose this thing. See, so you're getting less and less rational. So, for example, for me to keep a secret that I ate a Hershey's Kiss, see, that's a little irrational, isn't it? It's a little daffy. Nobody cares whether I ate a Hershey's Kiss or not. See? So the next thing is, I'll give you an example. I once worked with a guy, very smart guy, dynamic businessman. Worked with him for some time, and he had this big realization. That he had gone out with this girl, and it turns out that she was overweight. See, this came out in the disclosure, and he said that was the big thing. I did not want people to know that I was going out with a fat chick. See, he laughed at this. See, we sort of uncovered this. That was what the issue was here. Not that he had anything against her or it was a bad guy, just that he didn't want people to know that he went out with a fat chick. See, that's what he said. Now, some people don't care. Some people are fine. Okay, fine. Yeah, my girlfriend's 25 pounds overweight. I love her. See, he doesn't care. This guy, that was his big epiphany on this subject. And after that, we were done with that. We went on to something else. So what happens when a person has a secret? He becomes suspicious. I wonder if my wife knows that I'm going out with my mistress behind her back. You see? He worries about this. So the guy comes home. The wife says, oh, Fred, you're a little bit late. What happened? He wonders, I wonder if she knows that I was with my mistress. See? She didn't say anything about a mistress. But has this suspicion. I wonder if she knows. This is a big deal for people. This is very important in relationships. And the reason it is because the next thing down is upset. So when a person has a secret, he's restraining something, he did something bad, he doesn't want people to know about it, and he worries. Now, let me tell you, I know for a fact, 95% of the population has some chronic secret. In other words, let's say you have a guy, he's gay, or a guy who's a heroin addict, or a girl who is promiscuous, right? This is a secret. They don't want people to know this. So they go around wondering, I wonder if they knew. See, like some guy says, oh, you're such a pretty girl. And she says, oh, I wonder if he knows that I'm promiscuous. You see, he didn't say anything about promiscuous, but she has this suspicion. She's worried he might find out. You see? Now, once you have that worry in place, it eats at you. That's literally what the word worry means. And so that's why you'll see the person get upset. So the husband is fooling around with the mistress. He comes home late. The wife says, Fred, you're 10 minutes late. What happened? He says, don't tell me what to do. I'll come home whenever I want to come home, and you're not going to tell me when to come home. She's like, what happened here? All she said was, you're 10 minutes, why? Because he has this worry, you see, he's suspicious. And she sort of touched that. See, there's this irrational response. He gets mad. This is what you're getting when a person gets mad at you. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had many times when I was interacting with somebody, and all of a sudden they got mad. And I had no idea what's going on here. Why is this guy mad at me? That's what was going on. I touched something. He might not even be aware of what I touched, but he has this suspicion that's there. See, let's say a guy is gay and he doesn't want to know that he's gay, and his haircutter says to him, "You know, you're a very handsome man," and the guy said, "Oh, I wonder if this guy knows I'm gay." You see, the haircutter is not interested in that. He has no idea, and the guy might get upset by that. He might say, "Well, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it." See, he gets mad at him. See, that's irrational. That's what's going on there. You touch something, you don't even know what it is. But that's why the guy gets upset. Now, of course, there's such thing as being reasonably upset. Like, you know, you walk up to a guy and you insult him or you insult his mother or something. He's upset because you just insulted him. Don't make jokes about my mother. You see, that insulted the guy. That's rational. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about people who the guy gets upset and nobody knows why. It's because he had this worry that you might have found out about something that's underneath. And as I said, 95% of the population have something like this going on. So you could have a woman who's overweight, right? And she's supposed to be on the Atkins diet, right? But that day she had a chocolate shake. So you say, hello, Mary, you're looking like your happy, chubby self today, right? The guy's just being nice. And she gets mad. You see, there's no reason for her to get mad. She has some suspicion that he may have known about that shake, which doesn't make any sense. But that's what happens. The next thing the person does is he rationalizes it. So, guy's mad at his wife. So he goes to his therapist. Well, why are you mad at his wife? She's a terrible wife. She burns the toast. She undercooks the chicken. She puts starch in my collars. See, these are rationalizations. None of these are the real reasons why he's mad at his wife. They may be true facts, but they're rationalizations. So, you have some policeman who doesn't like Hispanics, right? So he hits the Hispanic with the club, he uses police brutality on him, right? Well, another cop asks, well, why'd you do that? He says, well, he had a bad attitude toward me. See, that's a rationalization. Even if that's true, that's not a reason to hit somebody with a club. So that's the next thing you'll get. The person who's upset will rationalize. And these rationalizations are, ironically, irrational. They don't, if you really dig into this, you'll find out that there's nothing to it. And you'll hear this all the time. Like someone will say, like for example, I don't drink. Someone says, well, I saw you drink champagne on New Year's Eve. Yes, that was 40 years ago. See, that's his rationalization for something. Why is he digging up this thing from 40 years ago? You see? So the next thing down from that is an identity, meaning you assume a persona. And I'll give you some examples. How about a woman hater, a man hater, a wife beater, a Lothario, a whore, a criminal? These are personas that people put on themselves. In other words, the guy thinks of him in this very specific way. It's an identity. And that comes after the fact of rationalization. So the guy says, this is a bad country and the average person can't get ahead. So I'm going to join the mafia. See? So he has a rationalization. And so he becomes a mafioso. That's now his persona. Or you have somebody who, who hates women, a woman hater. He has some rationalization. Women are all the same. Or you can't trust women. Or women are unfaithful. Some rationalization. And that propels him into, well, I'm going to be a Lothario. Or however he thinks of it, whatever word he uses, a playboy. Okay. So this guy is now stuck with some fixed identity that is completely irrational. And it's 7 layers below his regular self. The only way you can get this guy out of this identity is to get him from 7 to 6, from 6 to 5, from 5 to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. And then you get rid of the misconception, and he's back to his regular self. I did this with my clients thousands and thousands of times. I would see what the guy was manifesting, and I would know what was behind it. Right? So, for example, the guy's mad at his wife. He's mad at his wife. I say, wait a minute. Did your wife nearly find out something about you? Not did she find out, did she nearly? Well, yeah. Yeah, I wondered if she knew that I had gone to a poker game and lost $300. I kept that a secret. And I was worried if she would find out about that. See? So now he's not mad at his wife anymore. So, see, then you could address this on the level of a secret. Well, did you keep a secret from me, wife? Yes. I told her that I went a bowling, but I really went to a poker game where I lost $300. See? And I would say, well, did you commit some misdeed? Yes, the misdeed was that money we were supposed to be saving up to re-grass our yard. We're going to have a whole new grass put in our yard because it looks terrible. And that's what that money was supposed to be for. And so I blew it. See, we're up to level 2. Then I would say, well, was there some misconception that you had before you did that? Well, I think I might have had the misconception that it wouldn't affect our relationship if I did this. And I can see now that was a misconception because it did. See, and you got him all the way back to number 1. So once you get off the misconception, he can be his regular self again. So that's how you can unravel insanity, by going 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, you can spot a person at any one of these levels and fix it immediately. And I'll give you an example. For example, if I were worried about somebody finding out about something, I would say, well, I must have done something bad or I wouldn't be worried about that. See, I'm looking at level 3. What did I do that oh yeah, I see, that's a bad thing. And then I could go further and say, well, okay, I was keeping this thing a secret because I thought it was bad. So then I could look at it and say, well, is this really a bad thing? And well, yes, but I did it because I had this idea of X, Y, and Z, and that's level 1. So I'll just work myself right back up this in minutes. So by doing that, and this is something I do in meditation, I can maintain the persona that you now see. And that's why I tell people I almost never get upset, worried, angry about anything because I know this data. And if a little scintilla of that shows up, it's gone. because I just work it right back up again. It erases. So that's how you use this. It's very useful information. So I urge everybody to use this. Know what you're looking at. If somebody gives you a rationalization for why he's upset, it's trash. It's not a legitimate thing. He may be stating a correct fact, but the fact that he's using it to rationalize it is because he's upset. So then you have to get to why are you upset, you see? And when you get to that, you will find, and I've done this thousands of times with people, like, my wife cheats on me. I'll say, well, did you ever do anything like that yourself? Yeah. You see, that's 4. So he's worried about her. He's upset about her doing the same thing he's doing because he's worried she's going to find out about it. See, this is actually quite simple once you know what it is. Any questions?
No questions. Very, very useful. I definitely can see that. Very good.
Yeah, this is great when you're dealing with people, like dealing with your kids. You know what you're looking at. And you just have to, as is always the case in Septemics, correctly assess the level. Once you know the level, then you know the next level up is improvement for it. So if you can get a guy to stop rationalizing and just be upset about it, that's an improvement. See, you've got him from 6 to 5. But you might want to keep going and get him to 4. Well, what did you do that you were worried that she was going to find out about? You see? Needless to say, if you ask that question, you better have a rapport with the person because he's not going to want to tell most people. So that was my job as a facilitator, was to establish a rapport with the person so that they would feel comfortable telling me anything. And believe me, they did. So that's how I was able to unravel this. And by the time the guy left the session, he was happy as a lark because he got rid of all this stuff. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So he's now rational on that subject. Remember, it's a specific scale. Next.
Very good.
Okay, the scale of physical fitness. Well, this is well known to most people. Most people are concerned about this. What they don't know is that there are 7 levels. And again, this is extremely useful because once you find the correct level, you know the next level up. And I'll give you an example. I worked as a holistic health practitioner, part of my work as human development engineer, because people would often come into me and I would see that they had something actually physically wrong with them. I can interview the guy. Well, how much sleep do you get? Oh, about 2 hours a night. If somebody gets 2 hours a night, he's going to be an emotional wreck. I actually had a client, a very rich client, who I worked with for years and years. This woman hadn't had a good night's sleep in maybe 20 years. So I just said, okay. And I worked on her holistically, getting her to sleep, getting her to eat properly, take supplements. I gave her treatments to manage her meridians and all that. And, then I was able to look into all this other stuff. So that's sort of how I got to this. So this is a linear scale, meaning there's no apparent congruence between 1 and 7. It's gradual, meaning there's an infinitude of gradations between each of the levels, and it's general, meaning a person has one level. So every human being is at some level on the scale, and that's it. It's not context driven. This has nothing to do with context. You have a person in front of you, that person is at one of these levels. And if you can spot the level, you can help the person because then you move them up to the next level. So for example, sometimes I'll be working on a client And I say, how are you doing? And he's saying, well, okay, but I'm so tired. Oh, I can barely get out of bed. I'm happy. He went from 6 to 5. You see, he doesn't really understand that. But I understand we got an improvement on this guy. See, he's not going around with headaches or nausea or something. He's just plain tired. That's level 5. Weak. Tired and weak mean the same thing. So this is really useful on yourself and on others. Now, what are we measuring with this? This is a big thing that most people don't know. The dotted vertical line, okay? And there's really two components to this because there's no single word in English that says this. At the top of this scale, you have infinite survival potential and total immunity. That is above level 1 because it's unattainable by a human, although you can get very, very close. So that is what this is measuring, survival potential, and a component of survival potential is immunity. So at the bottom, below level 7 is 0 survival potential and no immunity. So if a person is level 7, he's dying, right? When he dies, he has 0 survival potential. The doctors disconnect him from all the machines and cover him up with a sheet. 0 survival potential. As long as he's alive, they're going to try to do something. Once he's dead, he's at 0. So this manifests in immunity. So I'm sure you've seen, there are some people, there are many doctors and nurses who go around sick people all the time and don't get sick. Well, how does that work? There's another guy, you walk past him and you sneeze, and the next day he's sick. Right? His immunity is low, which is another way of saying his survival potential is low. Now, when you cast this in terms of survival potential, you get into the idea of qi, right? Which is a Chinese word. So we sort of have this in Western medicine a little bit, elan vital. It's kind of what qi is. So that's what we're measuring here. So obviously, everybody should and wants to be at or near the top of the scale, which is true for every scale, really. But in this one, this includes everybody. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be physically fit. Now, most people don't do anything about it or don't do anything to improve it, but they still want it. I mean, I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, boy, you look terrific. What do you do? And I tell them, it doesn't make any difference. They don't do it. This happened to me a couple of days ago. Some woman came up and said something like that. I said, no drugs, no alcohol, no tobacco, no sugar, no junk food. Well, this is a person who's 50 pounds overweight. She's not going to do that. She's going to go right home and eat a salami sandwich, or cookies, which I'm not going to do. So the way to help people with this is to pick up the person at the level he's at, if you can, and get him up to the next level. So if a person is dying, that means he's succumbing. He's on the way down to death, okay? If you can improve that person up to merely being sick, that's an improvement, okay? So the guy's in the ICU, they expect him to die. Well, they come back a week later, he's not in the ICU. They move him to another ward. Yeah, he's out of danger now. We don't think he's going to die. But this guy still can't get out of bed. So he's gone from 7 to 6. He's sick. He's dysfunctional. Now, that could mean a broken leg. So you're not going to die from broken leg unless you get gangrene. Then you can die from it. But typically, if a guy's got a broken leg, we think of that as a dysfunction, which is really what we mean by sick. Could be he has an infection, whatever it is, he's sick. Everybody knows what that means. Now, if he improves from that, he'll be weak. I told you that I had COVID. After all my COVID symptoms went away, which was a great relief, I was weak for 3 months. Took me 3 months. I had to start from zero to build myself back up. I had to let's see if I can do 10 push-ups. Okay, I did it. I'm done for today. That's weak. So that's unhealthy. That's enormous percentage of the population of the world is at this level. They're unhealthy. I mean, if this guy has to run up 7 flights of stairs to rescue a child from a burning building, he's going to have a hard time. He might not even make it because he's weak. He's unhealthy. Up from that is normal. This is like a normal person, what we call healthy. Now, what do we mean by a healthy person? That's not an athletic person. It's just a healthy person. He doesn't have any diseases. He doesn't have any broken bones. He doesn't have an abscessed tooth. He's just normal health, okay? So, of course, there are a lot of people at that level, but probably fewer than you'd think. And this is the person who, if he wishes, can become physically superior to most people by moving to level 3. Level 3 is strong, which is another way of saying energetic. So this is the guy who can work 8 hours and then go and play 18 holes of golf, go home for dinner, and he feels fine. See, he's energetic. He's not just healthy, he's energetic. That's better than healthy. This guy has high immunity. He's not going to get sick easily. So he goes around his sick children, he hugs them. He doesn't get sick because he's strong. I was once treated holistically by a woman who said to me, I could probably just ingest a microorganism or a parasite, and my body would just kill it. And I think that was true. I mean, if you looked at her, you could see just how she was very, very healthy she was. She was energetic. Then above that, you get to athletic. An athlete is vibrant. Okay? So when this is not a guy who on the weekend plays volleyball with his friends. That doesn't make him athletic. Okay? This is like he's on the college football team, basketball team, baseball team. He's in the Olympics. He plays professional sports or plays college sports. He's on the high school football team. Athletic. Okay? And most people really don't have a grip on what that's like. They don't really have the concept. This is a guy, he weighs 140 pounds. If he punches you once, he breaks your jaw and knocks you out. So this is what you got in, people like, these great boxers like Sugar Ray Robinson, the greatest boxer who ever lived. I mean, if he wanted to, you would be asleep before you even knew what happened. You wouldn't even know you hit him. That's how fast he was and how strong he was. He would hit you once, and you would be asleep. Athletic. If you start falling now from athletic into strong, then you start to lose your athletic abilities. Well, this happens eventually to all athletes. I mean, the average lifespan of an NFL player is 8 years. Right? Most of these guys come into the NFL, they're about 21, 22. So that means by the time they're 30, they're over the hill. And all athletes know this. They know that this is going to end sometime. And then above that is a level that people really don't get, which is superhuman, which is indestructible. Now, what do I mean by this? Samson, Hercules, Methuselah. Methuselah is in the Bible said to have lived 900 years. That's for that 900 years, he was indestructible. There's also a guy in Hindu philosophy and history called Babaji. Babaji was a guru who is said to have lived 300 years and looked 30 the whole time. So this is a historical character. If you talk to the gurus and the Hindus, this is not somebody that's made up. Now let's go over to Hercules. Well, did Hercules actually exist? Well, you don't really know. I mean, you hear all this stuff about the Trojan War. Well, the Trojan War is part of Greek myth. Most people think there actually was a Troy and there actually was a Trojan War. So is this myth or is it not myth? You see what I'm saying? So to me, when I read the Bible and when I read the Odyssey, to me, they can either, both of them could be viewed as either myth or history. Take your pick. And the truth is, we don't really know. I mean, you have 1 billion people in the world who are followers of Jesus Christ, and many people who dispute that he ever even lived, that there ever was such a person. I've heard this from many sources. There is a little tiny bit of historical data about that there was such a person. I think it was Josephus, who was a Jew, who was a Roman historian, who mentions him. Or it might have been Tacitus, I forget. One of the two mentions him. The other was a guy named Jesus who was crucified around the time of, I think it was Tiberius, Emperor Tiberius. So do we know? We don't really know. Now, I don't know that it makes a difference, because what's in the New Testament is what's in the New Testament, and either you accept it or you don't. So if it's not important to me whether or not he actually lived at all, I do accept what's in the New Testament, and I think, well, whoever the hell this guy was, I like what he said and I agree with it. So now, look at the New Testament. Jesus went into the desert and fasted for 40 days. Okay? And he was around all these sick people and didn't get sick. Well, isn't that indestructible? Okay? And if you read about the 7 impossible feats of Hercules, that's indestructible. Samson, okay? The Jews say that this is a historical personage, okay? And they say he slew 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. Did not even have a sword. And he killed 1,000 men. So that's what we mean by indestructible. Well, the rest of the story is they cut off his hair and he lost his power. And, that's the unhappy part of the story. So, do these people exist? Probably, but not many of them. And, there was a guy named Wiley Brown who was on TV in the 70s in a show called That's Incredible. And they got a big table that seats 12. They had all 12 people sitting on the table. He got under the table and lifted it off the ground on TV. This is a man who hadn't eaten solid food in 25 years. Okay? He was a breatharian. He didn't believe in eating. He barely even drank anything. His idea of a meal was a little water with a little lemon squeezed in it. That's it. So, isn't that indestructible? So, there are people who say, that can't be true. Well, it was true. That's why it was on That's Incredible. So, anybody who was watching, it was a big TV show, primetime TV show. Millions of people saw that. So, also, you have to realize that a person doesn't stay at this level. So, sometimes you'll have baseball players who say, you get a guy who's shutting them out. Most of them can't even hit the ball. And, he goes back to the dugout. How is he? He's unhittable. That's an actual word that's used in baseball, unhittable. That means this guy is superhuman on that day. Now, on the day when Roger Clemens set the record by striking out 20 batters, he was superhuman. He didn't stay that way forever. He got old like everybody else. But there's a reason why that's the record, striking out 20. There's only 27 outs in a game. So that happens. You hear this all the time, where a player is, or an athlete is just, nobody can touch him. Rocky Marciano was 49-0, the only heavyweight champ who never lost a bout. Think about that. Now, most people say Ali was the greatest heavyweight of all time. He got beat a few times. And Ali was asked, do you think you could have beaten Marciano? He says, I don't know. So Archie Moore, who was a heavyweight contender, fought Marciano and, of course, was knocked out. He said it was like fighting an airplane propeller. That was his description. And if you watch videos, which you can find on YouTube, of Marciano fighting, that's a very apt description. He just never got tired. Marciano used to run 15 miles as a warm-up for the bout. Right? I was a runner. Okay, I ran over 30,000 miles. I never ran 15 miles. Okay, 6 was my limit. That's enough. I want to come back and be able to do this again. So we're talking about a guy who just did not get tired, period. So he would just keep throwing punches, and eventually he'd wear the guy down, his guard would drop, he'd hit him on the jaw once, and the guy was asleep. So was he indestructible? Seems pretty superhuman to me. Never lost. So, how do you explain that? That's beyond athletic. All the professional boxers in the world are athletic. Trust me. I was trained as a boxer. I know what I'm talking about. These guys are athletic. You have some little 125-pound guy, hits a 250-pound guy once, breaks his nose, knocks him out. End of story. Okay? That's what you get when you're dealing with a professional boxer or even a serious boxer, like an Olympic boxer. Doesn't matter how big they are. So that's what the superhuman category is. Very few people ever get there, and the people who get there don't stay there. But it's there. And as I've said before, the levels that people have trouble understanding in Septemics are the extremes. To the extent that it occurs at all, people have trouble understanding level 1 and level 7 because it's out of their reality. Now, being a sports fan and a former athlete, I have a lot of reality on this. That a person can get in this state, I mean, like Barry Bonds, they walked him with bases loaded. They were so afraid of him, they intentionally walked him, allowing a run to score, rather than run the risk of him hitting a grand slam or maybe hitting a double and driving in 3 runs. Okay? So at that time, he was superhuman. I saw him play. It's like when I saw him hit a home run, it was like if I was flicking a fly off the table. That's how easy it was for him. It's like there was no effort. He just went poof, out of the park. And having seen many of the greatest baseball players who ever lived, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Eric, all of them. I mean, it was like, wow. This was not some Herculean swing. It was just from, he would just stand there and wave the bat and the ball would go out of the park. So he was superhuman for a while. So that's what the scale is about. Any questions?
No questions. No, and I think that's probably a good place to pause for today.
Great.
Um, hey, again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your time and the knowledge that you have on this topic. And it's so fascinating to see how it is so applicable in so many different areas of life. And I truly look forward to exploring that further as we dive into the rest of the scales together.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So after we hang up, we'll talk about future dates.
All right, very good. All right, thanks for listening. Until next time, we'll see you then.